Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of My Faith with Homer and Pip. With our producer, Brent Yunk, I'm Tommy Pippins. Homer and the Holy Spirit got this endeavor started. Homer.
I like to do a variety of Mother Teresa, but nobody's complained yet about hearing the same one too often. So I'm using the one top of the list. You go with the number one hit. Mother Teresa, my secret is a very simple one. I pray. There's no part two. There's no add a little bit to it. Whenever she was asked, it was that short, that simple, and that easy. And I'm sure she'd love that if people remember anything about Mother Teresa, one quote. My secret is a very simple one. I pray.
Beautiful. And in her dark times, it seems as if she surrendered and kept going toward the cross, loving and serving people. I was told that the opposite of surrender is control, and vice versa. I was with three people who have known their share of suffering, but they have surrendered, and the power of the Holy Spirit is just bursting right through them and impacting others. Just as our guest will today, we are so delighted and honored and blessed to have Lidia Crivello with us. I was just with Elisa yesterday. Lidia, thank you so much for being with us. As I say, we always start with a homer. He gets that ball rolling.
So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My curiosity always starts, and that is this is your spiritual resume. It will be there for people forever. And now you decide, how do you want to start? What do you want to say first in telling people of my faith? Take it away.
Wow. My faith journey has ups and downs. But there are two significant moments in my life where I know without a doubt in my mind that there is a God and that God was present. I'm baptized Catholic, grew up Catholic grade school, high school, college. Catholic faith was always very, very important to my parents. Both of my parents had me later in life. They both survived World War II. And after being liberated from slave labor, when my father came here to the United States, years later started a family with my mom, Catholic education was so important. He made tremendous sacrifices. He worked 37 years at Patrick Cudahy as a meat cutter, but sent both my sister and myself to St. Mary's Academy. So my parents made huge sacrifices. We didn't have a house. We didn't have a car. I didn't even have a bicycle, but I had a Catholic education. Later on, I'll come back to that story about my time at St. Mary's. I guess there's two moments I really wanted to share with you where I know that God was with us and that we had signs. In 2004, my father started showing signs of Lewy body dementia. It was the beginning of a very long journey. I, at that time, was working as the festival director of Polish Fest. It was my dream job at the time. And never thought that life would take us down the road that it did. In 2010, my dad's dementia started to increase and become more evident. In January, one day he wandered in 17-degree weather in his pajamas and his socks. And by the grace of God, he was fine. But I knew then and there that my sister and I had to make a very difficult decision, and that was how to take care of my dad. I share this because my father's dementia was rather significant when something happened. About a year later, after taking care of my father, he had an upper respiratory infection, and I believe that it turned into pneumonia because after a few days, he became very lethargic, almost unresponsive. So we called 911 and he was taken to the hospital where he laid for 3.5 days unresponsive. And we were told that we had to make some decisions. I have to share that right before my father became unresponsive, he called out my mother's name. And I was laying in bed with him and he said, Hanya. And it scared me because my father hadn't mentioned my mother's name in many years. She passed away in 1999. And I literally dragged my father out of bed into the living room chair and I propped him up because somehow I thought I was going to keep him here. If by some reason he was seeing my mother, I was going to do everything I could to keep him. The next day, he was sitting on the chair. I had told my sister what had happened and how it frightened me. And my sister was on the couch. I was in the kitchen making soup for my dad when we heard him call out my mother's name again. And this time he said it twice, Hanyu, Hanyu. I ran into the living room, and at that time, my father with advanced dementia made the sign of the cross. Mm. And in perfect Polish, he prayed the Our Father out loud. Wow. Those were the last words that I heard my father speak before he became unresponsive. So here we are in the hospital. The doctors are telling us that, we have to make some decisions with him. And I was convinced that it wasn't his time. Something in my heart just told me it wasn't his time. And I kind of laugh and I say, Google and the Mayo Clinic saved my father's life because I sat up all night Googling dementia and pneumonia. And I stumbled upon an article where they said that dementia patients don't always show the same signs of pneumonia. So I begged the doctor for a CAT scan. Long story short, they wound up doing the CAT scan. And 5 hours later, the nurse came back and told us that they found a spot of pneumonia on his right upper lung. 10 hours later, he woke up and he said, I love you. The wonderful part of this story is my father lived another 11 months after that. But there was one time, this was in January, about 2 months later, my father had a very lucid moment. He was in a memory care facility. And for whatever reason, he was speaking in sentences. You could understand his words. They were complete sentences. And I always told my sister, if my father ever had a lucid moment, I was going to ask him if he saw our mom. So we wheeled him back into his room, and it was just my sister and myself. And I knelt by his side and I said, Tata, do you know that you were dying? That the doctors told us you were dying? And he shook his head and he said, no. And I said, yes, Tata, you were in the hospital and the doctors told us that it was your time. And he didn't believe me that this had happened. And I paused and I just went right at it. And I said, Tata, do you remember seeing Hanya? And for the first time, I called my mother by her first name because I didn't want my father to think I was talking about his mother. And he closed his eyes and he nodded his head and he said, yes. And he said, mówiła, że jest dobrze I jest źle, ale na końcu jest dobrze. What that means, it is good and it is bad, but at the end, it is good. Such profound words from a man with advanced Lewy body dementia. And I asked him again, I said, Tata, what did Hanya say? And he said the same phrase, exactly the same. I then went on and I asked my father, I said, Tata, what do you ask a person in this state of mind? And I said, Tata, was there a light? Did you see some kind of a light? And he said, no. And I said, Tata, did you try kissing her? And he said, I did, but she kept running away. And then I asked him, I said, was there anyone else there? Was it just Hanya? And he said, yes, her and that other one, ta I ta druga. And I asked him who, and he said, Sesha. Sesha was my father's oldest sister. who died during World War II.
Mhm.
He was incredibly close with her, and he rarely spoke about her because it just pained him so much, the loss of her. And at this moment, my father told us that he saw my mom and his sister, two women that he adored. Had my sister not been there, I'd say lock me up in a padded room. But without a doubt, I know that there is life after, that there is a God, and that my father did indeed see my mom. And honestly, I struggled with death, the idea of dying, but that brought such comfort to my heart, knowing that my father saw my mom and my mom is waiting for him. So that's one of my big stories that I like to share about how I know without a doubt that there is God. The other moment that really impacted my life and my now husband's life happened about 4 years ago. So Danny, my husband, plays hockey, and he had a very, very bad injury, a Masonov fracture. He shredded all the connective tissue in his leg, requiring major surgery. We did everything that the doctors told us. He took blood thinners, everything. 6 weeks after his surgery, it was Good Friday, and I went into school to work. At the time, I was working at St. Joan Antietam High School. And I went in to get some work done. Danny assured me he was fine. After work, I called him and I was coming home, and he told me that he thought he pulled his shoulder, that his shoulder was bugging him. He thinks one of the dogs might have pulled him a bit, and didn't think much of it. Well, a little later on, by the time I got home, we started our drive to Hartford to pick up Danny's youngest daughter. And he kept holding his shoulder and telling me it was bugging him. And I asked him if we should go to urgent care, and he assured me he was fine. We kept driving, heading towards 83, and he couldn't get comfortable. He was very uncomfortable, and I kept asking him. I said, "Are you sure we shouldn't have that checked out?" And he's like, no, it's just a pulled muscle. I'm fine. Well, I'm driving, and eventually I see Danny's anxiety was escalating. His breathing was getting more labored. He was trying to adjust himself in the seat. And I finally said, "Danny, are you having a heart attack?" And he's like, "No, it's my right side." Well, I'm just driving, and I'm thinking, and I'm processing, and I get to a stop sign, and I don't know if you're familiar with the corner, the stop sign on 83, where you look to the right and you see Holy Hill. It was at that moment, after I moved from the stop sign, I started driving, and I had this warm feeling pass through my head down to my toes. And immediately I knew he had a pulmonary embolism. I just knew. I can't even explain it because it wasn't top of mind, but it was as clear as day in my mind that it was a pulmonary embolism. And I'm a rather emotional individual, and somehow God helped me remain very in control. The roads are kind of twisty and turny, and I was afraid that if I started driving too fast, I might flip the car, and that wouldn't help Danny at all. So I didn't say anything to him. I just started driving fast, but in control. And as I started driving, I said to Danny, I said, "Just so you know, when we get to Hartford, I'm taking you to urgent care." And he didn't argue with me. And he said, "But before we go there, can we please pick up my daughter?" And I didn't argue, but when I got to the fork in the road, one way was to get Peyton, one way was to get to urgent care. I turned towards urgent care and I said, honey, we'll pick up Peyton as soon as we know what's going on with you. All of a sudden, Danny points out a blue sign that says hospital. And it's like they were these little signs from God. And I don't know my way around Hartford very well, but hospital means there's a hospital nearby. And I was going a little faster than I should, and I never speed. And Danny goes, Lydia, you're going kind of fast. And I said, I'm okay. If I get pulled over, I'll explain to the police officers. Well, lo and behold, I see the entry to the hospital and I turn and Danny's like, oh, so now you're taking me to the hospital. And the words that came out of my mouth were, I do believe I am, which is not how I speak. And I rushed into the emergency room and I explained to them that my fiance had major surgery and he was having difficulty breathing, and that I thought he had a pulmonary embolism. Within an hour, Danny was diagnosed with a double pulmonary embolism. One was a saddlebag clot that was blocking 80% of his right lung, 20% of his left. And honestly, he was really, really close to dying. By the time he was in the hospital, they put him on medication. He spent 7 very scary days in the ICU. He had more clots in his legs. And I think the moment that I knew God was present and had everything to do with saving his life was while we were in the hospital that first night. I had to head home because we had just gotten a puppy and we weren't anticipating a long stay in the hospital. And Danny said, you need to go home. You need to check on the dogs. And before I left, he said to me, can I tell you 2 things? The first thing he said, you were right. I should have gone to urgent care right away. And the second thing he said, can I tell you what happened while we were driving? And I said, yeah. He said, you know that stop sign at that big intersection right by Holy Hill? And I said, yeah. Apparently, right before we approached the stop sign, Danny looked at Holy Hill and he closed his eyes and he said, dear God, please don't let me die. I started crying when he told me this because he didn't know how I knew he needed help. An interesting story, Danny's Lutheran, I'm Catholic, and one of the things we always talked about is, what is a miracle? And once a long time ago, we went to Holy Hill and we saw the canes and the crutches, and I kind of explained to him what has happened at Holy Hill. And he always questioned it, whether or not that stuff really happens. I can tell you 4 years ago, Good Friday, that changed his life. It changed my life. It brought us incredibly close as a couple. It brought us closer to God. And there isn't a doubt in my mind that there is a God and that he is in our lives and he is showing us and giving us signs, and we just need to be open and listen with our heart and soul.
I hope I'm correct, but I sense you really want to tell these stories.
I really do. I really do. Anyone who wants to hear it.
And why?
Honestly, I feel we live in a world where there's so much evil, and people need to turn to God and believe in God and pray to God, and that God will help us in our lives. We all have our challenges. I just believe that the gift I received, the Catholic education that I had as a little kid, was an incredible gift from my parents. And there's a reason they felt so strongly about making sure that I was brought up in the faith and believing. so I just want people to know, and that believing in God and praying is so important for us.
And I wonder, I know I could be wrong, that there may have been times you were told these things could happen, with different stories, and you're thinking, I don't know, maybe. And then they happen,
Right.
literally, or similar to what people had told you when you were young. I was going to ask you about your parents, but yeah, they weren't kidding. They were
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest testimony is, it makes me smile because Danny believes in miracles, and he knows without a doubt in his mind that that was divine intervention, that that was the Lord letting me know and saving his life. And you know, people have their struggles, and we all have our challenges in our personal lives, and I, in a way, it's been a rebirth. It's definitely been a rebirth for Danny. It's been a spiritual rebirth for me as well, because there's no other way to explain what I experienced. And how did I know? There's no other reason. And then when Danny shared with me that he actually looked at Holy Hill and he prayed to God at that moment, and right at that moment when I moved from that stop sign, that I would feel that without knowing that he had asked the Lord to save him. Yeah, I think it's very important that people reconnect with God. It's something I'm very grateful for.
Tommy, I got more, but I want to know what you want to ask now.
I know you do. We gotta keep going. We can go all day, but we'll promise to get you out by noon, Lydia. Lydia Crivello is our guest on My Faith with Homer and Pip, and we are so thankful for her. So the old reporter did just a little bit of research on you, Lydia, and I spoke with someone in your office, Director of Development at Waukesha Catholic Schools, correct?
Yes.
And making a difference there, I'm sure. And I said, what sticks out about Lydia's faith? One, she is, to Homer's point, she is bold. She will shout it from the mountaintops. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And then she did mention around your parents. And we can understand now why it is so important. Do you ever get a point where you say, well, I don't know, Holy Spirit, I should say something, but I'm not sure. I don't know how I might be taken. Or is it just full speed ahead? I have experienced the love, the miracle of God, and you have to also. You got to join me in this life and in heaven. Whereas Dad said, it's what is it? It's good, it's bad, but then it's good.
Mm-hmm. Um, I love talking to people. I don't bring it up to everybody that I meet, that's for certain. But oftentimes when I find someone who is in a situation where they do believe in the Lord, but maybe they're losing faith, or they're going through some challenges. I know quite a few people that have an ailing parent, someone who's struggling with their health. So oftentimes I do like to share those stories. So do I stop people in the grocery store and tell my story? Probably not. But it's a lot of times when we run into people and we talk about our marriage and how close we are. Oftentimes when we run into someone we haven't seen for a while and Danny shares his near-death experience, we definitely bring the Lord into our story.
Lydia, it's just remarkable to me the story you told about your parents and Dad in particular, and the hurt and pain, and your aunt, his sister, who you must feel so blessed, huh? That you knew that God was going to bring you into the world to this point with these incredible gift givers.
I am, and I'll tell you, I so wish my parents were here.
Well, they're
My
here. You know
I,
that. You know they're
I
here
know.
with us right now.
Oh,
And
I
they
know
are.
they're here. I know they're
Yeah.
here, and I know they know what I'm doing and where my life is right now. But I have to tell you, in my current role here at Waukesha Catholic, one of the things that I help do is raise money for tuition assistance. And it's very important. Catholic education, there's a cost to that, and parents make sacrifices to send their children to Catholic schools, much like my parents do. And my senior year in high school, my father lost his job after 37 years. He was 66 at the time, struggled with finding a new place, a new company or factory that would hire him. And I knew we were paying our tuition month to month, and that was a struggle for us. And here I am, my senior year in high school, and I know I'm not going to be able to graduate with my friends and, get that diploma from St. Mary's Academy. And one day in religion class, I was sitting, and my religion teacher gave me a little note card. And the note card has a little birdie on it. And inside, all it said was, a little birdie told me you could use some help. Your tuition has been paid for in full.
Hmm.
Some angel helped me. I was never able to find out who that individual was. And I tried, and I tried to find out. And I love how God puts you exactly where you're supposed to be, when He wants you there. I feel that He has brought me to Waukesha Catholic in the role that I'm at, because I'm crazy passionate about Catholic education, as well as helping through our tuition assistance program. And when I speak with donors, people who support our school, I am saying thankful to you, because I don't know who helped me, but individuals who are helping us, and helping the students, are helping someone like me. And for that, I'm grateful. And that honestly is something I wish I could just talk to my parents now. And I know I can, and I do, and truly thank them for that gift, because that, through all the challenges in my life, that has kept me going.
Imagine the hugs in heaven. Can't wait for that.
Oh, I
I
can't
want to
wait.
get back to, and I'm sure you can, right? I want to get back to Homer, but I'm curious. It comes to my mind. How do you pray? You're so spirit filled and full of love for the Lord. What does prayer look like for you? Not
Oh, that's a
only
good.
praying, but listening.
Mhm. So that's changed over the years. I will tell you that up until when my mother passed away, she would come. I was 27, and she would come to my room, and we would kneel by our bedside, and we would pray together. That changed when my mother passed away. My father and I started praying the rosary together quite a bit. Now, as an adult, I find myself in the morning, I always think, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for the day, and I'm grateful to be healthy. So I always make sure to thank God when I get up. We pray before every meal. If we're in a restaurant, we hold hands and we pray. It doesn't matter. I'm not afraid of someone seeing me at, the local restaurant praying, because I am grateful for the food I have. I always pray before I go to sleep as well. And I, every once in a while, when things are stressful, when things are tough, I close my eyes and I just talk to God.
That's beautiful. Okay, Homer.
I just want to know, you observed how important it was to your parents for that education by their actions. Did they tell you why, or did you observe them? What was it that they felt you just had to have that education?
I don't know the full answer to that question, because my father was 15 when the Nazis deported him to slave labor. So I don't really know much about the school he attended. I just know that God was always very important. Both my parents were brought up Catholic, and my family in Poland is very, very faithful. I do know when my dad was here and when we were growing up, even when they were on strike or he was laid off, my father always said, I promise you, you will always have your Catholic education and your piano lessons. So those were the two things that my parents were very passionate about. And and I do know that my father shared that when he was being beaten once during the war, he had a holy picture in his pocket. And when he was laying on the ground and he was being whipped, he just had this image of the Holy Family, and he believed that that saved his life. So Poland is very Catholic, and our upbringing was very traditional. And I know that that is why my parents wanted to make sure that we were brought up in the faith.
If you don't have time to tell your incredible stories, but you know someone has a faith, I'd like to ask this. You have 60 seconds. Just have a little short time. What are you going to make sure you tell that person so that they understand what's at the top of your list they need to hear first from you?
60 seconds. You're killing me.
You should have been a broadcaster.
I'm a
We
talker.
can relate. We can relate.
60 seconds. You know, I feel it in my heart and soul that God is alive in me, and that we always have to turn toward the Lord for help and support and guidance. And we might not always understand the road, the path, the journey that God puts us on, but he does have a plan for us. And sometimes it does not look like what we thought, what we imagined, what we thought, what we prayed for, but God ultimately has a plan for us. And we might not understand that middle part, but in the end, we will find our place.
You didn't need 60 seconds. You gave me a t-shirt in 10. I feel heart and soul that God is alive in me. The alive will be bold. Sorry, I said 60. You only needed 10.
I love it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Unless Homer, you have anything else? I just close with this, Lydia.
I got my
Okay.
t-shirt. I got everything.
That's it. Beautiful. I think there are a couple of t-shirts there, man. Life is good, it's bad, but in the end, it's good. God bless you, Dad.
Right.
Anything that you want to share, Lydia, that perhaps didn't come out? I think you covered many bases, but perhaps something that went through your mind. We're just trying to stall, keep you here a little longer. We've got a few moments.
You know, I not everything is always happy and wonderful. There was a time in my faith journey where I found myself distanced a little bit. Unfortunately, it happened right after my mother passed away. And there was a priest that came to pray over my mother, and for whatever reason, the things that he said to me that night, it was very sudden. My mother had a massive heart attack, and the words that he said to me were that her soul has left her body and that she won't go to heaven because of certain time frame. And I was so confused. I was in shock at that time. And I just asked the priest if we could pray together. And it was really very upsetting because my mother, in my eyes, was a saint. She was very selfless, very loving. And I was very confused about, I didn't know that there was some rule that you have to be blessed by a certain time or your soul doesn't go to the right place. And I struggled with that quite a bit. It didn't push me away from God. My father, my sister, and I prayed a lot after that time, but it raised a lot of questions in my mind. And I actually had an opportunity to speak with several priests about that. And about a year ago, I went to a retreat and had I went um, to speak with the priest and um, to confession. And afterwards, I asked him if I could talk a little bit about the situation. And the priest reassured me that if my mother was a kind and loving and saintly person, that by all means she's in heaven. But I I don't know. It could have been the stress of the situation. Maybe I didn't hear things correctly. Um, but I never left the thought, the idea that God was there. I knew that God was in my life that whole time, and that God would help us through those challenges. And with my father's journey with dementia, it became very difficult to take care of him. Tried to do that with my sister 24/7 for about a year, and it became very, very challenging. And I spoke with God all the time and just asked him for strength and the courage and the energy to keep going and to take care of him, because that's all I cared about, is making sure that he was fine. So my parting words would definitely be, don't lose hope and faith in God. Through the challenges, he is there.
Homer, anything?
You add to that, you're in trouble.
He's going to fire me from this job, which pays in passion. What a gift it is. Yep, we're done. Lydia, you have such a beautiful faith story. Thank you for sharing so eloquently, helping all of us to and through the cross of Christ. And to your point about mother, if anyone who raises a daughter such as you, if she's not in paradise, even the mercy and the precious blood of Christ notwithstanding, nobody has a chance. So
I do
your heart rest
have
at
one
peace.
thing.
Yeah,
Tom,
forever.
I do have one thing. I
Okay.
can't, Lydia, for you to pass the information along that this is available to people at the school, kids at the school, and how many will go to you after they watch it and go, wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate the chance to share my story.
Yeah. One last point, and that is that Homer always says it, when you see yourself back, as he said, it's there for all time. And it's going to be such a blessing as it has been to us. And as Homer said, anyone and everyone who will hear it when it's posted in a couple of weeks by Brent Young, our incredible producer. Thank you again. God bless you. We've got a few minutes to let you go on to the next as you glorify God, and look forward to connecting in some fashion again.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. This is My Faith with Homer and Pip for the Homer and Brent Young and our special guest, Lidia Crivello. God bless you, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. And God bless Danny Crivello.